Meantime, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says American forces will carry out the most intensive round of strikes against targets in Iran since Washington began military operations 10 days ago. Speaking during a Pentagon briefing on Tuesday, Hegseth says American forces are preparing expanded operations targeting Iranian military facilities. The Defense Department says the campaign is focusing on sites linked to regional attacks and concerns surrounding Tehran's nuclear program.
We will not relent until the enemy is totally and decisively defeated. But we do so on our timeline and at our choosing. For example, today will be yet again our most intense day of strikes inside Iran. The most fighters, the most bombers, the most strikes, intelligence more refined and better than ever. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, the last 24 hours have seen Iran fire the lowest number of missiles they've been capable.
Staying with the Iran-Israel situation, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced that military actions against Iran will remain ongoing, with operations targeting the country's leadership and strategic infrastructure. The campaign has included strikes on key Iranian sites as part of broader security measures. That's according to statements from the Israeli government. Iran has responded with missiles and drone attacks on Israel and neighboring Gulf states, increasing regional tensions and affecting critical shipping lanes, such as the Strait of Hormuz.
השאיפה שלנו להביא את העם האיראני לפרוק את עול העריצות, בסופו של דבר זה תלוי בו, אבל אין ספק שבפעולות שנעשו עד עכשיו אנחנו שוברים להם את העצמות, ועוד ידנו נטויה.
Still on that situation, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva have called for immediate end to the escalating conflict in the Middle East. The appeal came during President Ramaphosa's state visit to Brazil, where both leaders also explored ways to strengthen trade, investment, and strategic cooperation between their countries. News Central's Bongani Ziba reports.
Beyond economic cooperation, the leaders addressed pressing global concerns, particularly the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. Both Ramaphosa and Lula called for an immediate ceasefire, emphasizing the need for dialogue, diplomacy, and respect for international law to restore stability in the region.
We reiterate our call for the peaceful resolution of disputes in line with the United Nations Charter, and we condemn the loss of life, particularly the lives of civilians, and the destruction of vital infrastructure in that part of the world.
Dialogue and diplomacy are the only viable path for building a lasting solution.
Brazilian President Luiz Lula da Silva urged President Cyril Ramaphosa to boost defense cooperation, warning that both countries were vulnerable to foreign invasion.
But I'm not sure if Comrade Ramaphosa can see that if we do not prepare ourselves in the area of defense, we might get invaded at some point, you know? So this is something that Brazil has a similar need to South Africa.
President Cyril Ramaphosa's diplomatic mission to Brazil marks a significant moment in South Africa's engagement with Latin America. During bilateral talks with Brazilian President Luiz Lula da Silva, both leaders reaffirmed their commitment to long-standing diplomatic ties anchored in the Strategic Partnership Declaration signed in 2010. The meeting also brought together business leaders from both countries to explore new opportunities for trade, investment, and economic cooperation.
The annual exchange between Brazil and South Africa has been standing still for almost 20 years, reaching recently $2.3 billion.
South Africa and Brazil share a commitment to equality, economic growth, and the eradication of poverty. And these shared values provide a strong basis for continuing to build practical, mutually beneficial initiatives that advance our respective national development priorities.
As both nations seek to expand trade and investment, the leaders reiterated their commitment to deepening cooperation and harnessing the full potential of the South Africa and Brazil partnership. For News Central, Wongani Siziba.
We're now being joined by Global Affairs Analyst Ejike Okpa, who joins us from Dallas, Texas. Thank you for joining us, Ejike.
For having me. You're looking good in that suit of yours.
Ejike, I wish I could be dressed just like you are, comfortably and not wearing a suit. But we're talking uncomfortable situations right now. I mean, the situation in the Middle East is affecting quite a number of things around the world. I mean, economies, markets are struggling. The oil and gas industry is globally shaking, and with all of that impact. But now we've heard from the U.S. Secretary of Defense, we've heard from the Israeli Prime Minister that this is ongoing. But yet we still hear from Lula da Silva and Ramaphosa calling for a peaceful resolution or a ceasefire. What do you think how this is playing out? What do you think?
Look, I don't have a magic wand. I am not clairvoyant. I see the news just like you see the news, and it gives me a pause. It's like, how did we get here? Is this something we could have prevented? Where did diplomacy fail, and then we have to now go punch each other and poke each other? I think it comes to a time when the person who is in a fight, you assess your capacity and your abilities, and then you said, hey, I am going to give it up, not that you're surrendering, I'm just going to make an adjustment so that my own people, again, every country and every president should be more responsive and responsible towards the conditions and affairs of their own particular people. And that's what I think Iran hasn't done, or Lebanon hasn't done. And then, then you see, if you harboring my enemy, I'm going to come after you. So countries supposed to now start to have very stringent, rules. Hey, if you're in conflict with somebody, don't come here and hide, because, that's going to, expose my country to be attacked and get affected by things that doesn't concern me. We're in 21st century. When the First World War happened, I could understand at that time the world is not where it is today, and the Second World War. Now, I'm not saying we're in a Third World War, but I'm just saying we shouldn't be having this kind of stuff. Yes, build your defenses, but don't use it. Sometimes, you do it to tell your people, like we do in Texas, and I have it on my door. I don't call 911. That's a warning. If you step into my territory, guess what? You're gonna get blown away, and then after that, we're gonna ask questions. So Ramaphosa and da Silva talking about Brazil and South Africa. Call Trump, call the Prime Minister. It's not just that's a cheap publicity. Call them and say, hey, Mr. President, what can I do to persuade you to scale down on this stuff? That's what relationship means, and not to call on UN, because we have seen UN is not effective. If Brazil and South Africa were to start building up on their defenses, it would take them decades, because there's a technology and resources behind this kind of stuff. So my thing is, can the people in the Middle East, can Iran come to terms with its own situation and try to be a peaceful member in their own region? The oil prices, of course, is going to get some spikes. How long is that going to be? All of us are going to be paying for it. That's why all of us have to find a way to prevail on our own local leadership and say, call this thing off. I think you've had a phrase, they say, call off the dogs. call them off. Somebody has to call the dogs off so that they don't go on an attack and fighting anybody.
Okay, Ejike, yes, you talked about the implications of leaders not looking inwards to say, okay, whatever you're doing out there, don't let it affect my people. They're not really caring about their own people. But would you say President Trump is actually caring about the Americans? I mean, he's the kind of rhetoric, listen to this, a quote says, death, fire, and fury. There will be death, fire, and fury if oil supplies in the Gulf are disrupted. They're already disrupted as we speak. How can that's some kind of dangerous rhetoric?
Yeah, I mean, the presidents have always said things, and they have the biggest microphone. But I live in Dallas, Texas. I'm not concerned about a bomb landing on my roof, or my water is going to be disrupted, or my light is going to be out. So these are the things we have to look at. When you get into a fight with somebody who's really going to punch you and punch you hard, you look at it, who's gonna absorb those punches? Just like the elephant and the grass, when they get into a fight, who's going to be trampled upon? I'm just saying the Iranians are the ones now that are feeling no light, no power, no water, no nothing, no job. Everything is stranded. American economy is still going on. Texas economy is still booming. But is that the case in those parts of the world? No. So that's what I'm saying. You look at your own capacity. I'm an Igbo guy. I'm going to say, or gonna go somebody wants to get into a fight when they see who they can beat up. That's how it is. Nobody will get into a fight if they think your strength can counter their own strength. Iran has nothing to counter America and Israel. They might do all of those things. It's more like a wounded lion trying to stand up and fight. At the end of the day, they're going to suffer the most. And I'm saying the leadership should now look at themselves and be honest with their own capacity and let their people prevent them and say, call off the dogs. Suffer. This is not, they are not surrendering, but you're just going to, call it out so that you can focus on what matters for your own millions of people that are suffering.
All right, Ejike, I don't know if I can let you go. Just hold on to you for a few seconds as I run through some things here. I mean, Iran has appointed a new supreme leader whom their media reports say may have been injured already by the escalating tensions or situations in the Middle East. The Mojtaba Khamenei may have been wounded. That's according to Iranian TV. But he was born in 1969 in Mashhad, a major religious city in northeastern Iran. The son of the supreme leader. He was educated among Tehran's political elite. Now, he's a veteran of the Iraq War, forged deep ties with the IRGC, later pursued advanced theological studies in Qom to cement his authority. For decades, Mojtaba operated informally as his father's gatekeeper. Allegations of election meddling and crackdowns on protests defined his rise as a hardline shadow leader. And there are those who are concerned that he might have been the one behind his father's strength. Following his father's death in February 2026, the Assembly of Experts elected him, and this marks the Islamic Republic's first father-to-son transition during wartime crisis. Now, he's the third supreme leader following the death of his father, Ali Khamenei, in recent airstrikes. His rise signals a historic shift towards a militarized, hardline government. The 56-year-old will take command amid extreme personal loss, having lost his parents, wife, and son in the bombardment. Closely tied to the IRGC, Mojtaba's leadership prioritizes military dominance over clerical transition. Analysts warn that this revenge-driven consolidation likely ends hopes for diplomacy as the region activates proxies across the region. With President Trump rejecting the succession, Mojtaba now faces an existential war and a massive test of legitimacy at home. His appointment as supreme leader signals absolute continuity, but choosing him, the regime prioritizes theocratic stability over reform, projecting strength amid regional wartime crisis. Now, but Ejike, if you're still there, there is yeah. So this news carried by the Iranian media itself that he may have been injured. How do you think this will play out?
I don't know how it's going to play out. Again, I said earlier in the opening, I don't have a magic wand. Neither am I clairvoyant. But, you have had inspiration, the sins of the father may be visited on the son. The Iranians may have actually put him in this position so they know he's going to be wiped out or taken out. So that way, that family's, line of succession is destroyed or decimated. Just like the case of Saddam Hussein, all his sons and daughters were wiped out, and Iraq has got some peace now. The same thing happened in Gaddafi situation with his sons and all that kind of stuff. What I'm just saying, leadership of a country should not be a hand-me-down situation, except when you are doing it and you are having peace, like in some of the areas in the Middle East when they hand to themselves, but they have peace. But in the case of Iran, you have seen that it has been disruptive. The Iranians don't like it. And so when this guy takes over from his father, nobody has seen him in public. They just, putting out some media materials for him. Maybe he has been wounded. Maybe he's, it's a dog on a limb, or he can't even do anything. But they want to expose him some more so that then he's taken out, and then the Iranians will say, now we've taken care of this family that's been a nuisance to them, and let's go see new leadership. Trump said it. He's not happy with this election. I don't know what he's going to do. But again, what is this like? Again, I want to say, what Igbo people say, how come one man is more than a community? It is a sign of a weakness that, millions of people will suffer because of few individuals who have risen to the top and they're lording it over them. People may not like America, but we don't put up with that kind of, type of people. That's why we call our president Mr. President, not His Excellency, not His Majesty, not any of those stuff. So people should know that they are entitled to life as God has given it to them. But when an individual or individuals are lording it over them, it's up to you to challenge them, to question them and resist them. Remember again, America had a civil war because at the time, some people wanted slavery, some people didn't want it. They went into that war, killed themselves, and we still having challenges, but we are still a country that has a relatively peaceful existence. So do it for yourself. You've had the expression DIY, do it yourself. Don't invite outsiders. Invite outsiders, even in a relationship of husband and wife. When you introduce a third party, what do you get? So take care of your home. Rise to the occasion, because strong families make strong, countries, not the other way around. So I hope that, the situation in Iran comes to terms with themselves first, give up this stuff and focus on rebuilding the country. People have said, oh, Iran has been there for thousands of years. I don't know any human being that has been alive for thousands of years. My grandfather used to say, the day you saw me is the day I saw you. So our age starts from that moment.
Okay.
It's not about how long you have lived, it is how well you are doing.
All right. Thank you so much, Ejike Okpa, Global Affairs Analyst. Thank you for joining us. Ejike joined us from Dallas, Texas. It's always a pleasure having you here.